thank you guys for all coming to the Cam Skills event for getting started with Mastercam Lathe. My name is Sherman Snyder. I'm a Mastercam AE in the Houston, Texas area and surrounding areas as well, Louisiana and wherever else I'm needed. And a little bit about myself, my experience. I've been in manufacturing for over 18 years. I've got a wide range of anything from oil field, aerospace, medical, and also a very wide range of different softwares as well. To name off a couple: GibbsCam, EdgeCam, Unigraphics. Well, NX now. I'm kind of showing my age there a little bit. Just a little bit of my interest here. I love to travel, love seeing new things. Anytime I go to a new city, I like to visit zoos and stuff like that. Just kind of a little interest of mine. I love building PCs, anything new technology. If I catch something on the internet, it usually catches my attention. But most of all, I'm a big family guy. I got 4 kids. Everybody says kids make you old. My kids keep me young, so I'm definitely blessed in that aspect. But let's go ahead and jump along. And for this Cam Skills event, getting started with Mastercam Lathe, I'm going to talk about 5 easy steps for creating a Mastercam Lathe program. And we'll start off with aligning our model and machining with ease. Simple steps to define and set up your stock as well. Creating your own tools, and there's going to be a couple interesting things I'll talk about in that as well. Generating complex toolpaths in just a few easy steps, and then what everybody comes to any kind of CAM software for: backplot, verify, and generating G-code, which is pretty much the main thing that we're looking for. Let's go ahead and take a look at the part that we're going to work on today. This is our MLC CAD pawn here, and of course I modeled this inside of Mastercam, made it all shiny and pretty. And we're going to get started in Mastercam 2021. So I'm going to open up a new instance of Mastercam, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a Mastercam Lathe program. Now, we're going to go ahead and take our model, our MLC pawn here, and we're just going to drag and drop it right into our graphics window. And this pawn came in from assembly of my chessboard here, so it didn't come in to the right orientation. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Model Prep, and we're just going to align the face to put the pawn in the correct orientation that we needed for the Mastercam Lathe. And in this case, it's going to be my top view. I'll say OK. And now everything's aligned the way we need it to be. Next, we're going to go ahead and go to our machining area. And you notice I got a wide range of machines here. For this Cam Skills event, we're going to talk about the Mastercam Lathe, and I'm just going to bring in a default lathe. And this is going to have generic G code, so it's going to be pretty standard on what you'll see on a majority of the machines out there. And the first thing I'm going to do, now that we have our lathe part set up, we're going to have to define some stock. And you notice in Mastercam we have a left spindle, right spindle, left spindle chuck, right spindle chuck. For this one, we're going to have a standard lathe, and we're just going to work on the left side. I'm going to go to my properties, and inside of here, you notice I could define OD, ID, length, and the Z length as well. For here, we're going to go ahead and give it an OD of 1.5. And you notice our stock shows over here in our graphics window my length. I'm going to say 2.5 for that. And my part is exactly 2.5. I'm going to use margins. So we're going to add, we'll say 125 to the right face. And let's add some to the back as well. So now we got a little bit of stock that we can machine on both sides. And I'm simply going to say OK to that. And now we can go right into creating some chuck jaws. Inside of our properties, I bring it up. You notice down here there's multiple ways to create different sets of jaws. I could use pie jaws, rectangular. I could even adjust the steps inside of my jaws. For this, I'm going to simply say I want to use maybe 2-step jaws here. If I say OK to that, and you notice we have a preview over here of our jaws. And inside of our graphics window, you can see the jaws that we created as well. So there's a constant update whenever you're creating anything inside of Mastercam that allows you to visually see what's going on. Under our parameters, I'm going to go ahead and set my jaws where I want them to be on my stock here. And I can give it a reference point, or I can simply say from stock. And I'm going to give it a grip length of, I don't know, maybe 1.5. Let's see how that looks. There we go. That looks really good to me. Back of the stock against the chuck here, and my chuck jaws are on my OD. So that looks good to me. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. From here, I'll go ahead and say OK. I like the way everything's set up. So here we see, just in a matter of minutes, it's very simple for me to line this part up, create some stock, and create some jaws. Now, from here, I'm going to go ahead and save my part. And we'll just say, I don't know, I'll leave it as that, MLC pawn. That looks good to me. Save is your friend. People always ask, how much do you save? I tell them, how much do you want to lose? It's as simple as that. So from here, I'm going to go into my turning tab. And inside of my turning tab, I have all the operations that I can use inside of my lathe. And from here, I have my stock set up, so I want to go ahead and create some tools. And inside of my tool manager, Mastercam has a basic library that has your standard tools that you'll see. Boring bars, threading bars, drills, and you have your standard CNMG, DNMG, VNMG inserts as well. For this event, I have a custom library that I've created. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And you notice the icons from this look a little bit different than they did in the standard library. Mastercam has the ability to create 3D tools. I'm going to go ahead and drag these up, put them inside the turret, and we're going to look at one of these 3D tools so you can see the difference. Now, this tool has a taper to the back, and if you want to see this taper, we could bring the 3D tools inside of Mastercam, where the 2D tools, it's only going to show the 2D. So you have the option for both. And further down the road, we'll go ahead and jump into maybe another Cam Skills event talking about 3D tools as well. For now, I'm going to say OK. And I'm just going to discuss some of the tools I have in here. I have my standard CNMG 432, VNMG, and then I got a VNMG Neutral. I'm just going to say OK to this. And again, I'm going to go ahead and save my part. And for my toolpath group, I'm going to say the name of this is Pawn Op1. From here, we're going to go ahead and face the part. We want to get rid of the material on the front. And I'm going to show you how easy it is inside of Mastercam. We're going to go ahead and create a face toolpath. I'll select my CNMG tool. And for my comment that's going to output inside the program, I'll say we're going to call this Turn Face Op1. Above, we can go ahead and specify our feed rate. Maybe I want a 12 thou feed rate. And we can also say that we want a finish feed rate as well. Maybe go ahead and get our nice finish there. I could specify my spindle speed, maybe 450. And I'm just going to give it a max spindle speed of 1500. For the Mastercam lathe, if you see the little asterisk sign right here, it lets us know that the coolant is on. I can turn that coolant on, turn it off. For now, we're just going to go ahead and jump over to our face parameters. And you notice I didn't select any geometry inside of here. I'm just going to tell it that I want to finish this face at Z0. I'm going to create a rough step over. I'll say maybe 0.08, and a finish step over at we'll just 10,000 is good to me. That's fine. And I'm simply going to say OK to this operation. And you notice, just in a few easy steps, now we have our finished face. You'll also notice that I don't have any turn profile geometry. I'm running clean off this solid. This operation alone runs just off of a Z depth. The next one I'm going to do is going to be a finished toolpath, and I'm basically just going to skim this OD right here. Give us a nice clean surface to chuck onto. So let's go ahead and create that toolpath. And now you notice we have the option to do a wireframe mode or a solid mode. And I'm going to work off the solid mode. I don't want to go in there and create a whole bunch of geometry that I don't need. And I'm simply going to select the area that I want to machine. And I'm going to say OK. We'll go ahead and use the same CNMG 432 that we used for the face. Like I said, all I want to do is skim this OD here. And we'll just say finish OD op 1. It's going to be my comment. Give it a RPM as well, and a max spindle speed. We're going to go right off into the parameters. And you'll notice here that we have a couple different options. I'm going to select my lead in, lead out. And for my lead in, I'm going to go ahead and lead in at 180 degrees here, and I'm going to give my length 100 thou in front of my part. And I'm going to go to my lead out, and I can adjust the way I want my tool to disengage from my part. In this case, I want it to be 90 degrees. I want it to feed back, cut straight up. But I'm going to extend this contour by, let's say, 0.5. Extend, and you can also shorten the operation if you want to as well. In this case, let's leave it at extend. We're simply going to say OK. From here, we're going to go ahead and extend stock to contour. That way it reads everything here. And I'm just going to say OK. Now we have a nice clean tool path. Cuts back and extends up that 90 degree that you see here. And from here, this side's pretty much done. I could flip it around. I'm going to go ahead and save my part though. And I want to add some geometry to the front face, maybe some engraving, just so we could show a couple other options as well. So next, I'm going to go to my levels. And you see under my levels here, I have my MLC pawn. I'm going to go ahead and create a new level. Let's call this engraving. From here, I'm working in my top view. I want to go ahead and add some geometry to my right face. And we're going to go ahead and go to our wireframe. Let's create some letters here on this face. And we are MLC CAD Systems, so maybe that's a good one for us to add. And you notice my text is linear. I want to make it arc around. And let's give it that point here. Let's go ahead and adjust the height. We'll say 0.150. I'll make it a nice even number for my spacing. We'll say 30 thou is good. And we can simply give this a radius. I'll say 0.5. And I like the way that looks. The spacing looks good. Let's go ahead and rotate this around. Say negative 90 degrees. And I'm going to green check OK on that. I like the way that geometry looks. Perfect. Let's go ahead and put this back in our top plane. And again, I like to save my part. Next, I discussed the lathe tools here. And you notice I don't have any engraving tools inside of the lathe. I'm going to go over to my milling tools. And we're going to add a couple tools I have in this library as well. I have my 1/4 inch engraving bit. And I have a 1/8 flat end mill that we're going to come back and do the little flats on this in the next operation. Go ahead and say OK to this. Let's go back to our toolpath manager. Now, once we have our mill tools added in, we can go back to our turning tab. And I'm going to do a basic face contour. And as discussed before, I talked about our solid chaining method. And here I get to use my wireframe chaining method. That way you get to see how I would actually separate the two different geometries for my chaining instead of creating a turn profile. Now, for this, Mastercam has multiple ways of chaining. I can chain full, I can chain partials, but I don't want to go around chaining step by step on this. I want to drag a window just over everything inside of here. And Mastercam's going to prompt me, sketch approximate start point. And I'm just going to select right over here. And I'm going to green check on this, but there's one thing I noticed. If I go back, it also picked up the points for my facing operation. And inside of Mastercam, anytime you see something like this, I could simply go back and we could delete these points. And I'll say OK to that. I'm going to go ahead and select my tool. We have our 1/4" engraving bit. And I'll say our comment for this one, engrave face, op 1. And I like to specify what op I'm in. That way when I post it out, I can post out the complete program if I want. And you'll be able to see this here. Makes it a little bit easier for us to read there. I'm going to go ahead and force the tool change on this. And what force tool change does is it's going to send my tool home to a safe position. Let's go ahead and specify some feed rates. I'll say that looks good to me. 65 surface footage, that sounds great. We're going to go right off into our parameters. And for this, I'm going to turn my compensation type off. I want Mastercam to drive the tool right on the center line of this. My depth of cuts and lead in, lead out, I'm going to leave these off. I don't want to see any lead in, lead out. I want it to plunge right on that tool path here and engrave that surface. And we're going to go right into our linking parameters. And I'll say 1" clearance. My retract, I'm going to have 0.1, feed plane 0.1. My top of stock is going to be Z0 on that face. And we'll give it a negative value of 5 thou for the depth. And you notice I'm working basically from top to bottom here on the mill side, or for the C-axis contour face. I'm going to go ahead and go to my coolant tab, Let's go ahead and turn our flood coolant on. I don't want to run that tool dry. And I'm simply going to say OK to this toolpath. Now I got a nice clean toolpath. You see the retracts here. If I don't want it to retract all the way back inside of here each time, I can go back to my parameters. We can go to our linking parameters, and I can tell it to use that 1" clearance only at the start and end of this operation. Say OK. I can simply regenerate that toolpath and keep that tool nice and clean without wasting all that air time jumping back each time. From here, I'm going to go ahead and save this part. And the next thing we want to do, we want to go ahead and rotate this part around. Inside of Mastercam, we have a few different ways of doing this. I could do a stock flip, which is the operation we're actually going to use in this. But we also have kickoff pull. I could do a stock transfer to another chuck. You have chuck operations. We can use a tail stock. I can stock advance, and I could even use a steady rest if my machine is set up for it. For this, we're going to go ahead and use our simple stock flip. I'm going to go ahead, open up my stock flip dialog, and it's asking me, what geometry do I want to transfer around? In this case, I can go ahead and select it. I want to go ahead and bring everything in. I'm going to end that selection, and I'm going to blank this geometry when I flip it around. That way I don't see both of them inside of here. And it's going to go ahead and transfer my geometry to a different level as well. In this case, maybe I want to do level 100. My original position, which is my Z0, and my transfer position, we'll say negative 2.5. That's going to bring me to the front of this part here, with my part being negative or complete length of 2.5. So my original position of my chuck jaws, I'm going to leave standard to what we already have set up. And my final position, inside of Mastercam, we can actually select the diameter that we want to be on. And this, I'm going to go ahead and say, I want a little bit of stock in the front. I'm going to say OK to this. And here we go. That way I have a little bit of clearance for my tool to go ahead and retract past this without hitting my chuck jaws. I'm going to go ahead and save my part. My stock flip is complete. And we're going to create a second group here. I could rename this Pawn Op 2. From here, I'm going to go ahead and face my part. And again, I'm going to go ahead and use my CNMG again. And for my comment, I'll say turn face Op 2. And I'm going to go ahead and set some parameters inside of here. We have our max spindle speed and our spindle speed there. And you notice that we also have the option for constant surface footage and RPM, or inches per rev and inches per minute as well. And inside of Mastercam, one of the powers that you see here is that you also have inches per rev for your rough and inches per rev, or the option for inches per minute for your finished feed as well. And the same rule applies for your finished RPMs. At this moment, I'm going to go ahead and keep this spindle speed for my facing. We're going to go right into our finished face. And you notice that it brings in the last parameters that I have in here. And if you're set with these parameters, we could simply say green check OK on this. And there we have it, another finished toolpath. And you notice how easy it is. I don't have to go in there and select any geometry underneath this. If we look over here in our toolpath manager, you can see the two different groups between them. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. We're only concentrated inside of the Pawn Op 2 here. And I'm going to green check OK on this. The next thing I want to discuss, inside of our general toolpaths, right now, everyone, you guys see me working up here in this top general area. Mastercam gives you the ability to post out longhand code or CAN cycles. And I have many customers that prefer to see the CAN cycles over the longhand code, just possibly due to just wanting to see maybe more space in their machine. A lot of the machines nowadays, longhand code will fit in there all day long on the lathe, but maybe you want to have multiple programs inside the machine. I also have manual input that I can put inside of Mastercam code here. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do a manual entry. And when I open up the manual entry dialog, Mastercam gives you the ability to add comments or code that you may want to specifically put inside of your operations here. For this, I'm going to go ahead and say as comment, and I'm just going to say Pawn Op 2. And I'm going to green check OK on this. Now, you notice that I have a lathe face, and now I have a comment that says Pawn Op 2. And maybe inside of my comments, I want to put my name, maybe the customer, and most likely the part and rev number. But you notice that I have my manual entry under my toolpath. Inside of our groups, anytime you want to create something, if I need to go back, I can drag this and say move before. So Mastercam gives you the ability to edit toolpaths and also reorganize your toolpaths as you see fit. We're going to go ahead and say save on this part. And I'm going to go back to my CAN cycles that we discussed earlier. For this, I want to have a CAN cycle to rough out this diameter. And we're going to go ahead and use our BMG 432. Say rough OD for my comment. Let's give it an RPM and a max spindle speed. And we'll give it a feed rate as well. We're going to go over our CAN rough parameters. And I can give it an X clearance, a Z clearance. Let's do that. Give it a little bit more move to our toolpath there. My depth of cut, I'll say 80 as well on this. And my retract, 50 thou. And what I want y'all to see, over here we have the actual NC output. Anytime you make changes to this, Mastercam is giving you a preview of what changes you're making to these CAN cycles. So you see your G71, U and R for depth of cut and our retract. If I change my retract to say, I don't know, maybe 30 thou, you'll see the change here. Now we don't quite know what block numbers we're at yet, so Mastercam blocks those out. But it will give you a good representation of what your depth of cuts or what your stock that you're leaving, as well as your feed rate and everything else that you have inside of both parameters here from the page. We also have our rough direction, and we also have the lead in, lead out options that we had before. Now, inside of the CAN cycles, you'll see the lead in, lead out options a little more simplified. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to extend this stock. And I'm going to extend it by 40 thou. And I'll say OK. And we're going to come back inside of these parameters. I want to talk a little bit about the options Mastercam has. Right now, Mastercam has given us a type 1 roughing operation for the OD. Mastercam also gives us the option to do type 2 roughing. And type 2 roughing, anytime we're doing a type 2 roughing operation, we're climbing back, but we're also climbing down and up into many valleys for our OD. Now I could simply use the type 1 roughing operation and actually come back and dig these out separately, but I got a finished toolpath that we're going to discuss here that will cover that as well. For now, I want to go back inside of the parameters, and we're going to look at our plunge parameters here. And you notice right now everything's grayed out. Mastercam is only allowing my tool to do the type 1 rough operation. I'm going to allow it to do the type 2 rough operation, and I could give it a back clearance and a front clearance. We'll say 1 degree on the back clearance just to keep that back of that tool off my part. I'm going to say OK and OK to this. And let's go ahead and regenerate this. And there we have it. Now we have our nice type 2 roughing operation. The next thing I'm going to discuss is the finished toolpath. I'm going to say OK to this. And I'm going to give this VNMG here, the 35 degree. I'll force this output. I want to send the tool home between the rough and finish. We'll say the comment for this one, finish OD op 2. We'll give it a spindle speed. And I like the feed rate. I'm going to leave that alone. We're going to jump right into the finished parameters. And now you notice inside of here, I don't have all the options that I did inside of the lathe face or the rough cycles that we've done so far. All I have is my rough OD CAN cycle. Mastercam is reading any CAN cycle I have, just like if you would post out the code or if you would program the code manually. So it's going to read the same P and Q lines based off of this cycle here. And I'm simply going to select this. We'll say OK. Do you wish to keep the operation? Yes. Let's go ahead and regenerate this. And there we have it. So now my tool feeds in, cuts around, and here I have that 40 thou extension off the back side of the part. And take my part back to this position here, and you notice we have a gray area that our tool's not getting into. For this area, we have inside of our tool library our neutral BMG. And the one thing I want y'all to see is there's a green check next to the tools that I've used already. As you see on this one, I don't have a green check next to it because we haven't used it yet. I'm going to say OK to this. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to create a simple finish cycle for this. For this, I'm going to select this area here, and I'm going to green check OK on that. And now we're going to use our BMG Neutral tool. We'll call this Finish Front Undercut Op 2. And I'll set my feed rate and RPM. We're going to go right into our finish parameters. And I like my step over. I only want one finish pass. Let's go ahead and look at our lead in, lead out. And as discussed earlier, I can adjust how I want my tool to engage into my part. In this case, I don't want to come into the front face anymore. Maybe I want to drop down about right here somewhere. Now the geometry I selected is starting all the way out here, and Mastercam gives you the ability to shorten a toolpath as well, as discussed earlier. And I'll say I want to shorten this by 5/8. Next, I want to go to my lead out, and I want to go ahead and extend this by, we'll say 40 thou as well. And what I'm trying to do here is just make sure that the radius of my tool passes the end of my part. And I'm going to say OK to this. Next, we're going to dive into our plunge parameters. And I'm going to give it my back clearance, just as I did before. I'm going to say OK to this, and OK again. And now our tool drops down in the center, feeds down in the area, and you notice I don't have any gray area anymore showing what stock I have left behind. Now, after I've done all this work, I want to go ahead and save my part. And there's one more thing that we want to run on our part. We have this little slot here, both sides, 180 degrees apart. We're going to go ahead and jump into, sorry about that, we're going to jump into our milling tools. And I want to talk a little bit about the milling tools as well. If I look at this tool, you see the dialog is going to look a little bit different than what it did for the lathe. But I could specify my diameter, overall length, my cutting length. And anytime I specify something, if you look over here inside of the right little preview box here, Mastercam is going to show you exactly what area you're talking about. I can go to my finalized properties, and I can also name these tools, number the tools how I want to for my lathe, and you can give it a name as well. So it's a little bit different on the mill tool manager, but you still have the same amount of control over how you define tools on both sides. For this, I already have my tool selected. You notice we have the green check for the tool that we already used. I'm just going to say OK to this. From here, I want to go ahead and save my part. We're going to go back to our turning tab. We're going to talk a little bit more about the C-axis abilities we have. We already done a face contour for the front side. Now, let's go ahead and do a cross contour. And again, For our wireframe chaining mode and from our solid chaining mode, we had both options on how we want to select our geometry. Mastercam also gives you the ability to select edges. You have loops. We could select faces if we want. We have outer edges. So there's multiple options on how you can create your different chaining methods. For this, we want to go ahead and select our edge mode. I'm going to select that area there. And you notice the other arrows on the end, the red arrow being your stop, the blue is going to be a branch point. So you also have the ability to branch off different ways. And what Mastercam is seeing is the bottom loop here, this direction or this direction. For this, we're doing a simple contour. So we're going to go ahead and keep that bottom one selected. And let's select this bottom edge here as well. So now I have two chains. I'm going to green check OK on this. We're going to go over to our tools. I want to make sure I have my end mill selected. And we'll say our spindle RPM, maybe 1200 is max on our machine. We'll give it a plunge feed rate of 5. I'm going to force tool change. And we'll call this mill slot end op 2. Go ahead and go to my parameters. And I'm going to turn my compensation off. You notice we have the option left, right. I'll leave it for left. I'm going to go into my lead in, lead out options here. And you notice right now my toolpath is leading in and out perpendicular. We have the option to do tangent or profile ramp. I'm going to say tangent for this. And you notice right now I selected both sides. Mastercam also makes things a little bit easier on you. If I want all the options that I have on this side to be the same over here, I could simply just kick these over. And you notice my parameters change. Let's go to our link in parameters here. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want just maybe 0.5 at start and end. Top of stock and depth, I'm going to leave everything incremental. I do want my coolant on. I'm just going to green check on this. We'll say OK. You notice how easy it was to get a toolpath for our Y-axis milling here. Now, one thing that I talk about is how easy it is to get the toolpath. Another thing I want to discuss, I showed you how to move an operation around, but there was another option here as well, copy before and copy after. I can also copy operations and edit parameters. So for that front face, I was able to create this milling toolpath. I can also go back to my milling, my toolpath type based off of a copied operation, and we could even select the other side. Now this operation is going to have all the same parameters that I had before without having to go through everything and put in all this information again. I still have wear, cutter compensation left. I'm just going to green check OK on this and we'll regenerate. So Mastercam makes it easy to also not only bring in operations, but copy operations as well. I'm going to go ahead and save my part from where we're at. And let's take a look at the whole thing all together. From here, I have the option to backplot if I want and just see line by line where my tools are going. And I also have the option to verify and actually see the full stock removal of this MLC pawn here. You notice that we have our chuck jaws in place and our stock as well. I'm going to turn off our axis and gnomon. All I want to see is just this part here. One thing I like to see under verify, I like to turn a color loop on. It's going to let me see the differences, if you look here at the bottom, between each one of these operations. Makes it a little visually better for your eyes there. Let's go ahead and slow this thing down and turn off my wireframe geometry as well. And let's play this part. There we go. Slow it down a little bit more. And now you can see the engraving being done on op 1 here. And that looks very good. Next, the part flips around, and that's a bit fast. So let's take a look at this. And we're inside of our rough operation. And we come back for our finish. Notice the color change. And we come back and actually cut this out and do the slots. Go ahead and close this window out. And now we're going to take a look at what we came here for. So up here to the right of our verify, we have our post-selected operations. And for right now, I'm going to go ahead and post everything out. I can also select each one of these groups and post out in sections as well. For now, let's capture everything. Let's go ahead and look at the G-code output. And Mastercam Code Expert is going to open up. And one thing you'll notice is all these comments that we had. It's bringing in comments for our tool number and offset number, and also the comment we had for the operation. And we have our longhand code. You notice the C-axis motions. It's going to be our engraving. And let's go ahead and scroll down to Op2, and you'll see the difference between our CAN cycles now. We have our G71 and our G70s reading block 100 to 110. Mastercam also gives you the ability to see tool list as well. So we can either do setup sheets and see step-by-step operations with the tools. In this case, our tools are pretty standard. I'm just going to say tool list. And you'll see a generic list of what our tools are for this particular part. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And one thing I want to discuss, y'all see me post everything out. Mastercam also gives you the ability to edit common parameters in groups of toolpaths. And I can also change the name of each group. So I'm going to go ahead and change the name of Op1 and Op2. We'll green check on this. I want you to see what happens when I post out now. I say OK to this. You notice we have an Op1. I can save. And now I have an Op2. So inside of Mastercam, you can also split the operations. That way you can make a simple click, post one time, and post out multiple operations for your machine. From here, I'm going to go ahead and save my part. And I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to you guys. Feel free to ask any questions. And I'd like to thank you guys for coming along.